I'm very proud on behalf of the Delaware Valley chapter to introduce Dr. Jeffrey Baker. He's the Deputy Director of the Office of Biotech Products and Cedar.
Thank you very much. I'd like to talk about a topic that we're really focused on in the biotech space, and it's a great phrase. It's a phrase I'm in love with. It's the management of residual uncertainty. And I'm going to go through and talk on several elements of this, but I want to challenge you. Whatever space that you are in, all of us are in the business of reproducibly meeting expectations, and all of us are routinely confronted with having to manage residual uncertainty. But before we start, I'm obliged to give the disclaimer. The views expressed are those of the speaker and do not represent the owners or stockholders of the United States government. No, if you'd like to see policy, go to fda.gov. This gives me permission to talk with you. This is my email address. I tell my daughter, never give your email address to somebody that's not your friend. So we're all friends now, and you have this. Okay, so where to start, okay? And I was thinking about something that Steve Koslowski told me once. He talked about this fellow who was out in the field, and this big old balloon comes up. It's coming over the horizon, which is a pretty unusual event. And as it approaches them, the balloon kind of swoops down. The fellow throws out line and anchors. And the fellow up in the balloon yells down, and he points over in the direction of his head. He says, "Do you know what direction that is? Wait, do you know where we are? Where am I? What direction is that over there that the wind's blowing?" And the guy down below says, "Well, matter of fact, I do know." And he proceeds to give him the exact latitude and longitude, minutes, seconds, the whole thing. He gives him the GPS coordinates. He gives him the distance to the 3 nearest population centers of 40,000 people or greater. He gives them where he is relative to the true north and deviation from the magnetic north, and kind of looks up at him. And the fellow in the balloon says, "Well, you must be from the pharmaceutical industry." And the guy below says, "Well, as a matter of fact, I am. How'd you know that?" He says, "Well, I asked you a very simple question, and you gave me a very complete, accurate, involved, technically sound answer, but I'm still in the same situation I was in before I asked the question." And the fellow in the field says, "Well, you must be from the FDA." And the guy in the balloon says, "Well, as a matter of fact, I am. What makes you say that?" And he said, "Well, you arrive blowing hot air, you don't know where you are, you don't know where you're going, you ask me questions, I answer them, you don't understand my answers, and now that appears to be my fault." Now here's the cool thing about that story. It also works if you switch the 2 roles. So play it out in your mind. So a lot of it is about having a clear understanding of where we are and where we're going, and kind of some plain language. So I had this bright idea, go team, right? I'm going to make a talk all about maps. I'm going to talk about, we want to go from here to there, because maps are all about planning, and like where we are and where we're going. And then I was going to wax poetic and get all Robert Frostian, 2 roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both and be one traveler long I stood. Never mind, I have a BA. So, but anyway, so we were going to wax poetic. And then I thought, well, it's really not so much about binary choices. It's really about playing in a different space. And then I thought, really, it's about people trying to kind of get their baby to where they want it to be, and they kind of got a map, and the road's kind of bumpy, and you're trying to get it there, and then sometimes the baby just kind of takes off on their own, okay? And so maybe that's not the best talk to share with you, okay? Because really, it's not about maps. And really, it's not about saying, here I am, and this is where I'm going. It's not, show me a timeline that was hit. Show me a marketing plan that was made. It's really about managing residual uncertainty at a time that there's a lot of variation and a lot of movement. It's not so much about a map as it is about playing chess. Now, here's the thing about chess, is that there are rules. And all the pawns move the same, and all the bishops move the same, and there are rules. But no 2 chess games that you'll ever play are ever going to be fully the same, because all the pieces are interactive, and all the things that can happen, might happen, do happen, will happen, depending upon things that are actually outside that player's control. You're reacting and responding, but you're also leading and directing. And that's what we do, is we take projects forward in a highly regulated environment. You know, the regulation doesn't crush creativity. The regulation actually drives you to the master game. A sonnet has 14 lines every single time. That doesn't mean that you're creative when you write a sonnet. The constraint drives the creativity. And we're really looking at this chess game. Now, here's the deal. If you want to learn about chess, you don't go pick up a book by Bobby Fischer. Go find yourself a 6-year-old and get him to teach you chess. And you're going to have a positive experience. And he's going to say, here, we're going to start at the beginning. This is how the pieces move. And we have to take turns, and we're going to do the basics. So if it's okay with y'all, I'd like to start with just a few basics. And those of y'all that are in the biotech space, you're going to say, what? Well, you probably need to hear the basics too. So anyhow. So really, when we go through and look at this, biological products in the United States, I'm not talking about small molecules, I'm talking about biological products, are a subset of drugs. And drugs, as you may or may not know, are regulated in the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. Well, biological products, in addition to that, are licensed under the Public Health Service Act. Drugs are approved in the United States. Biologics are licensed in the United States. And in fact, at any time, that license can be rescinded. So you have to meet all of the standards for drugs and for biologics. Now, when I'm talking about biological products, let's get a little grounding. What do we mean by that? Something interesting happened in 2009. And while NPR was covering all the Obamacare stuff, one of the things they left off is that buried in it was an amendment to the Public Health Services Act that changed the definition of what a biologic was. That was actually in Obamacare, believe it or not, okay? And went through and they included proteins, except any chemically unsynthesized peptide, and said this is under the Public Health Service Act. Now, for those y'all that are in the biz, you'll know that historically, particularly like from the late 80s, early 90s, there are some biologics that were regulated as drugs, okay? And so what this says is that they will all be regulated as of March 23rd, 2020, under the Public Health Service Act, okay? Now, for some folks, this is an administrative artifact. If you have kept your process current from 1982, you know, and you stayed on top of it and all this other, for some folks, this is going to be a significant emotional event. And you should be kind to them when it happens. They were given 10 years to get ready for it. 10 years to get ready for it. And so we all know that people have been planning, and it'll all be fine and go smooth, but it'll be something to watch. Now, when we look at the definition of protein, what I want to give you is a definition that is not in literature, it's not in Stryer, it is not a chemical definition, it is a statutory definition, because judges do not understand tertiary structure and hydrophobic interactions. So we have to come up with a definition for judges, right? And so a protein legally is any alpha amino acid polymer with a specific sequence greater than 40 amino acids. And again, chemically synthesized peptide has the definition there that has other things. So this is what we're talking about when these regulated under the Public Health Service Act. So when you apply for an application, when you apply for a license, excuse me, I misspoke. When you apply for a license, that's a biologics license application. Pretty creative, huh? A BLA, because we have to have an acronym. So these things are submitted, and something that's a little confusing is they can be reviewed by either CDER or CBER. This is all FDA. If you're, and we'll have a beer sometime and we'll tell stories about CBER and CDER and the history and how it all got here. But really, CDER, which is where I am from, has applications for all monoclonal antibodies, therapeutic proteins, those are extracted from plant samples and microorganisms, and any recombinant or cloned manifestations of those. And also immunomodulators that are not vaccines. My colleagues in CBER, Center for Biologics, in largest part protects the American blood supply and vaccines, and is heavily involved in gene therapy and related technologies. And so this is something that not everybody fully gets, okay? But when you submit this thing, it is a big, complicated honker document. But what you're really doing is you're saying this drug is safe, it works, and I can make it the same way over and over and over. And the reason you have to demonstrate you can make it the same way over and over and over is so that the data that you developed for lot 1, 2, or 3 that said it was safe and that it works is relevant for lot number 42, 842 that you haven't made yet. Okay? So really, that's what has to be in there. Now, there is not a tick mark exercise. I have a friend named Phil Miner, and he says the company that fails is the company that comes in and says, just tell us what to do and we'll do it. The company that succeeds is the company that comes in and says, this is what we did and this is why it's okay. A BLA is a data-driven assertion that A, we know what we're doing, B, it's safe, it works, and we can make it the same way over and over and over. It's an exercise in technical advocacy. So again, you're not filling out forms, you're providing, if you will, an architecture of assurance, not a documentation of what you did, but a reasonable assertion of what you are very likely to do, okay? And what does that kind of look like? You're looking for an assurance of predictable, high-quality product and process, and it is always, always, always based on a foundation of sound science and good engineering practice. It's kind of supporting pillars are your lab data or other model data, pilot scale data, site manufacturing data, your quality systems. Sometimes some of those pillars are going to be really strong and solid. Sometimes, you know what, they're not. But if the other ones are, they can be mutually supportive. Now, I'm talking to a bunch of engineers. I know I need some cross trees. Really, the bridging between your lab data and your pilot data is your development program, your tech transfer package, your validation master plan. How does my quality management system manifest itself in routine commercial operations? And then also, process flow document, different companies call it different things. What does the process look like when it runs correctly? If you do not know, do not pass go, do not collect $200, okay? But what this does is that it ties everything together, not to provide a historical report of here is the excellent science that we did, but to provide a reasonable level of assurance that the medicine that we're going to be making years from now is going to continue to meet the needs of the patient. Now, this is done in the context of a product and process life cycle. We start out with, with discovery. We move into decision phase development. Do I have a product or not? You know, commercial development. Oh, yes, I do. Now I got to find a building, and get going. Building, startup and launch, and then continuous learning and improvement. Okay, and you can tell a lot about companies. I see a lot of companies. Are they in a box? Are they looking at the next box? Or are they looking at the whole big picture? Are they doing end-in-mind thinking or milestone-based thinking? It does not take sophisticated analysis to see it. You know it when you see it, and it tells you a lot about a company, okay? But this is how we go through and we develop these things. We move through the product life cycle, and there are different risks, and there are different enablers at different points. So for instance, remember the previous slide? Very early in the game, you don't have a lot of manufacturing data. Does that mean you can't launch your product? No, you have very strong lab data, pilot plant data. You need the other pillars to be solid. Late in the game, you may have 20-year-old lab data. Friends and neighbors, how relevant really is that? I want to see how have you been running your plant. And as you move through the life cycle, you're going to learn a lot. It's all about choices. Choices not just on what we're going to do, but on what matters and what doesn't matter, okay? As we move through this, and that is at least bioprocess, development, and continuous improvement. When's it over? It's not, okay? As long as we have a commitment to be a learning organization. Let's look at a graph that doesn't have numbers and units. Dangerous thing to do in front of a bunch of engineers, but y'all have to be nice to me. I'm an invited speaker. This is a graph across the product life cycle. I don't have a pointer, but if you kind of look at the beginning, that's kind of when you're doing development, and there's kind of some clinical trials, and then you launch that bad boy, okay, and it takes off. What happens later may depend if there are generics or follow-ons, but that's how it kind of goes. So just do this little mental exercise with me. True or false? If X is value, does this graph represent it? True or false? Number of patients and families impacted. Where in the product life cycle is that really? Well, ask yourself that. Information that we get, understanding that we have, true or false? For your company, for your partners, for your contractors? What about risk? Does this or does this not? Something to think about. Something to think about. What kind of risk? Risk to whom? Risk to the business plan, risk to the schedule, risk to the patient. We need to think about that. Spend. Something to think about. Or how about this? This is my favorite. Headcount. Just something to think about. And I do this just for pure speculative entertainment purposes. If hypothetically, out here is where your value is, out here is where you help people, under this curve, the area under this curve, is where you also have your company risk, Where is your head count when you're doing development? That's just a thought. And it's not just number of noses, it's your A-team technical people. You will be shocked to hear this. Some folks maybe put their A-team technical people on the front end. Anyway, we'll talk about that another day. Let me give you a case study, okay? Case study in risk management, in the management of residual uncertainty, in process control and alarm control system. If you live in the Washington area, you recognize this. If you live in any urban area, you recognize this. What you have is a large number of units that are highly engineered to achieve something, moving independently but in a regulated space, and they're capacity constrained. Every one of those cars can go 80 miles an hour. Not one of them will. Okay, they're capacity constrained. Okay, and you're driving along, and the driver's driving, and that car is so well designed that that driver doesn't even know how it works because they're listening to NPR or to Mike and Mike in the morning or something, okay? They're just driving along because it's working for them. They're well designed, okay? And then suddenly a light comes on. I don't know if you can see it, there's that yellow light, and on a Toyota Avalon, that's a low pressure light for your tire. Okay, so again, what am I saying? The alarm control system worked. Okay, the system worked. Everything is working, and you're in the middle of that road. But what happens now is the next part of the alarm control system is we got to think about what it means and what we're going to do. Now, this particular person who's thinking about it, I don't know what environment they come from. Maybe they come from an environment like ours, where we're learners, right? So what would we do at work? We would have a lot of meetings. Well, we have to make a risk-based decision. What does this really mean? What's like the light's on, but I'm driving fine and I'm doing good, and so she's kind of processing this, and we all know what happens after you have these meetings is you have another meeting to understand the input of all of the other meetings, so that you can make a decision. And you reach down under the steering wheel on a Toyota Avalon and you push the reset, and the light goes off, and you get to work. And you made a smart, risk-based decision because you delivered the car to where it was supposed to be, and you didn't have a wreck, and it was all okay. And you're a learning gerbil. And you walk away with that as a learning experience. This is an alarm control system because the first part of the alarm control system, everything worked. That was not a failure, okay? Alarm control system detects a signal, sorts a signal, but then we have to determine is the signal relevant and how we respond to it. Sometimes that is in silico, sometimes that's a carbon-based life form. But the good news is that we are learning gerbils, and so what happens is it comes on again and again and again, but we know that before we just ignored it and everything worked out okay. So here's what you do on a Toyota Avalon. You go under here and you pull out that yellow wire right here, and you fix your flat tire. This is what we see in an awful lot of plants. People are making risk-based, data-driven decisions based upon their learning. But the point I'm trying to make here is that the alarm control system is signal, is analysis and sorting, but it's also response to that signal and understanding of that signal. Okay? We're doing risk management, but this is not about technology so much as behaviors. And we have to look at that interface between the technology and the behaviors. What risks are we managing? Is it a risk to me, to us, to them? Is it a risk for Thursday? Is it a risk for next year or 10 years? And we're naive. I got to tell you, I don't know about y'all, my experience is we say one thing on the PowerPoint slide and another thing when it's got to be turned in Thursday. But we have to think about this as we go through and look at managing residual uncertainty. If we do end in mind thinking, there's a seduction to be distracted by everything that's going on in the here and now. And it's important to understand where we're going so that we can understand how to get there and how best to get there. So we want to understand the end game. And in my particular space, there are several end games to submitting and approving biologics license applications. So the good science, the good engineering's been done. We're up, we're running. Guess what? In the biotech space, when you submit, we're expecting to see this at commercial scale already. Okay? A little different than the small molecule side. Okay? You may have heard about accelerated approval, fast track review, priority review, an abbreviated pathway for biologics, breakthrough status. What is our regulatory strategy, and how does our control and design strategy feed into that? Well, first of all, if we look at accelerated approval, fast track review, priority review, I'm going to do the government thing and say, well, we published a guidance and I'm not going to read it to you. But there's a nifty table in there. And I got to tell you, a lot of the people that I work with love that table because it explains it to us, what all those rules are. Okay? But what you need to understand is for accelerated review and expedited review and all these, those are clinical determinations. What is the extent of the clinical trial? Okay? And people come in and say, hey, you know, we're starting up our building and we knocked out one lot, but we're good to go because it's a fast track expedited review. Okay? Not so much, okay? These are about clinical considerations because when you make medicine for people in the United States, the products and their manufacturer have to meet the same standard as any other because all those patients have that right to that same quality. And so frankly, the expedited speed up review very frequently puts enormous pressure on the CM&C component, the manufacturing component, okay, as we're moving forward. Now for biologics, there's a very special end game that was also buried in Obamacare, okay? And it was challenged in the Supreme Court, and it was approved, it was upheld, and what it basically does is it provides this is the name of the act, what it provides is an abbreviated licensure pathway for biological products that are shown to be biosimilar. Now, when you read the paper or go to your Google machine and you see a lot about biosimilars, it is something that is exploding in our current space right now. It is a different endgame. There have never been generic biologics. There still are not generic biologics. You cannot develop and file a generic biologic. We can talk about that if you want, but one of the reasons is the complexity of these very, very complex molecules and the processes that manufacture them. So this is something that's really caused an explosion that many companies are getting in and looking at preparing biologics that are coming off patent. But another really cool thing is happening, and that is a renaissance in the analytics supporting proteins and biologics, because people are lined up to figure out how to analyze the other guy's drug. And innovators are mortally terrified that the other guy will know more about their molecule than they do. And something really nifty is going on as there is an explosion right now in analytics and the advancement of analytics. And I don't know where biologics are going to go and what the impact in the economy and the patient space is going to be. I'm optimistic and I'm hopeful for very, very good things. Irrespective of that, it is really stepping up the game for engineering and analytical sciences in the biotech space. What does this really mean, that $50 word? What this means is that if you have a molecule that is highly similar to a reference product, you can submit that license depending upon previously existing information. Read clinical trial, right? So you've demonstrated this, that's highly similar. You can reference the other guy's work that shows it's safe and works. This is this is under 351K. I won't go into that with this audience, but it basically says you do not need the full analytical and clinical package. When we go forward, biosimilarity, and this is something that conceptually is very neat to me, says it is highly similar, not identical. For generics, we have to say that they're the same, right? Highly similar, but the differences are not clinically relevant. It's the risk to the patient. Of course there are differences. Of course one horse is faster than another, but is it faster than another, but is it relevant? Okay? This is also having a positive knock-on impact on how innovators do work, on how we look at buildings, on how my guys do reviews, okay? Because it's this refocusing on, is it the same or different? Is it clinically relevant? And I think that's really good for the American public and takes us to a much better place than box ticking, okay? Now, when we go through and look at this, I've got to show the pyramid. This is something that you may see a lot of. For biosimilars, it is, again, this is the win for the physical and analytical chemists, okay? It starts out at the bottom with structural and functional characterization. Based upon that, you say, what extent of pharmacokinetics and pharmacodynamics do I need? Based upon that, what clinical stuff do I need? And so the principle is, if you know a lot about the molecule, you need less and less and less in animals and people, okay? Again, that's a real paradigm shift for biologics. I mean, I remember the old days where the process is the product. This is where we are now with LC mass spec and with a lot of our other new technologies. So let's say I get an application in. This is called the development framework. Several things can happen. We can say, thank you very much, but no. And we get them in, and they say, this is highly similar. And we kind of go, no, not really. Even with my glasses off, that's not highly similar. We get some in where we say they're similar, but we really need more. And we have a lot of talks with the company, okay? And one of the things that's very different in the biosimilar space, with drugs, you pay your user fee when you submit your application. For biosimilars, you submit it when you start your IND, your clinical trial. But the reason is that provides access to the FDA so we can have these dialogues. We can pick up the phone and call somebody, okay? You can say they're highly similar, and then there's this thing called highly similar with fingerprint-like similarity. I've typed that a lot. What does that mean? Beats the heck out of me. It's really important though, because it acknowledges that technology advances, and today I don't know what technology I'm going to have next year or the next year. So embedded within the guidance is a confidence in the advancement of the technology to say it is conceptually accessible that we can have a characterization package where we don't have to do clinical trials and we don't have to do animal studies. Okay? Have we seen it? Nope. People are always coming to us, well, what does that look like? I have great discussions. I spent a whole day at MIT one day just blue skying with people on what it might be. Okay? And we look forward to the industry and to academia and to the brain trust to bringing that forward. Frankly, I don't think it's going to be a list of assays. I think it's going to be a list of relationships. When the dust settles, we'll see. I think it's probably going to be a space or a probability space. But I like the idea. I think it's forward-looking to say we acknowledge that we don't know what it is, but it could be there. So another thing that happens is that we go through, and the biosimilarity space is driving all kinds of critical innovation, and that innovation is spilling into other spaces. Another end game is embedded in an interesting piece of legislation, the FDA Safety and Innovation Act, FDASIA. A lot of people have never heard of this. Why? It was passed the same week that the Supreme Court upheld Obamacare, and NPR can only carry so much, okay? But here's the thing. If you haven't read this, you will only hurt yourself. Go out and Google some lawyer who provided a summary, okay? I've only read parts of it. It's heavy stuff. But what they did is called Christmas tree legislation. There's a whole bunch of stuff that's in it, right? And there's a reset. And if you are in the biz, there is something here that is going to touch you. And basically went through and Congress said, what behaviors do we want to incent? What behaviors do we want to disincent? And they went to town on it. It's good stuff. It's good stuff. But I want to talk particularly about Title IX here, and want to talk about a particular end game called breakthrough therapy designation. This is a new thing. You may have heard a lot about it. It's important for manufacturers to understand what's going on with this, okay? Okay? So basically it's for a serious condition, an unmet medical need. And there's preliminary evidence that says, we think we nailed this one. And you come in and you request it. And the FDA will respond within 60 days. And we take this very seriously, and to give you a hint of it, since this legislation was passed, only once have we ever missed the 60-day clock. And when does that happen in the government? we're all friends. I gave you my email. Okay, I mean, this is taken very, very seriously. And are you granted breakthrough status? And what if you get it? What does that mean? We can give priority reviews. You can ask for all kinds of fast-track designation. There's an all-hands-on-deck mentality. It makes my life hard from a headcount management perspective. Okay, we reshuffle stuff. We move the A-team around. I've got my budget and timeline too, right? But you get a breakthrough status, we saddle up on this. The work is designed to say, what do we need to get this to the patient, and what can we have later in a risk-based way? We frequently will allow data to be submitted as you get it, instead of waiting for the end game. But we're particularly looking at what can we do to help the company understand what they need to do to have a manufacturing process and facility that can meet patient needs as soon as possible. How can we pull that forward? Okay? The first breakthrough product actually came through our office. and the legislation was there and the guidance was there, and then we got one, okay? And it was really exciting. And it was really cool, and it was fun to see reviewers get really energized around it, because it was for an unmet medical need, and how can we saddle up and make this happen? Since then, we've had several come through, and probably a disproportionate number have come through our office, quite frankly, because the nature of biotech, okay? But this is incredibly exciting for patients, is incredibly exciting for the company. It can be very hard on a manufacturer, because that year or two that you've been counting on for the clinical trials and the tox and all evaporates, okay? So if you look in this guidance, you're gonna see something here. It's a very important sentence, and I don't quote regs a lot in this kind of setting, but you wanna know this sentence. When sponsors receive the designation for breakthrough, they should be prepared to propose their commercial manufacturing program that will ensure availability of quality product at the time of the approval. It doesn't say that you have to have done it yet, but you need to be able to walk in and say, here's our plan for providing those patients a reliable supply of this high quality medicine. And here's our analysis of it. Okay? That's the partnership there. Okay? And as a community, as a sector, we're all learning to navigate this space. Okay? So it doesn't say you must have demonstrated, but by golly, you need to have a plan. Think about why. I mean, come on. For one thing, you don't want to start a bunch of kids on a therapy, then not be able to complete it. You don't want to have the stuff on allocation. It's not going to be in this program if it's not an unmet medical need. So that's in there. Let's talk a little bit more about that. What do we really mean by this? We're interested in hearing the status of the product and process development programs. There are some companies that walk in with pride, and there are some companies that take a gulp. But we need to know where you are. Where are you right now? We want to know what are the critical quality attributes for the product and the process. You may or may not have all the parameters scoped out, but what are the attributes that matter? We want to understand where are you with regards to your process controls and testing. We want to understand where are you with your container closure system. We want to understand where are you with linkages in your development train. Where are you with stability? Guess what? You will not have 2-year stability. We know, we get that. Go team, right? We'll work together, we'll figure it out. But where are you? What do you got? And you need risk-based analysis of failure modes and residual uncertainty. And we're all friends there. Again, I gave my email. There are some companies that are excited about this. Here's where we are. Let's sit around a table and sort this out. There are some companies where the culture is one of don't tell the FDA nothing. Only 2 things can happen, nothing and something bad. You do not do that. What? Come on, I was in the industry over 20 years. Come on. I taught the class, okay? No, make them ask. Make them ask. Well, culturally, this is a whole different ball of wax. Because if that's where your head is at, there's a real problem here. Because this is a different kind of an end game. This is we're looking to pull it forward. And that's culturally challenging to a lot of places. Okay? Also, we need to understand what your plan is for supply. And remember, you suddenly got this designation. Do you have capacity? You going to contract it? Where? What's the plan? A lot of places, defer site selection until very late in the game. I understand why. There's all kinds of, we're looking for that infusion of capital that, that comes with the announcement. I get it. But what's the plan? Where are you with regard to site sourcing? FDA is not going to be involved in this part of the decision-making process in a routine way, but we're looking to pull forward an unmet medical need. Okay? What's the plan? Where are we with scale-up life cycle process validation plan? It may be you don't have the whole book. What's the plan? Let us know the plan. What is the role of your QMS system? What is the availability of product at time of launch? What is your inventory status? What's the plan? And what are plans for assurance of market supply? No one expects these to all be green. You just had 2 or 3 years knocked off your development timeline. Okay? But we need to figure out what's the plan, because we're managing that residual uncertainty. We're managing those outcomes for the patient. Because here's the deal. Openings teach you openings. How many people in our biz know how to do IQ, OQ, PQ? Not a lot of people have launched a product. Okay? There's a lot of openings in our biz. Okay? But success hinges on our understanding of the end game. When I was in development, I used to tell folks, there's 2 kinds of activities. There's those that make money and those that cost money. And the only way to make money is to sell something. And I would look at my development group, right? And they'd all kind of look at the ceiling and look at the floor, Yeah, guys, we're here to launch it or kill it. Let's go, okay? But this is what we're looking at. What are the end games and how do we get it there? There are a lot of moving pieces. We need to understand how all the pieces move, what the restrictions are, what the rules are in our highly regulated industry. We understand how they interact with each other and how one piece supports another. No single piece is going to win the game. You can be absent a rook and still come out on top if the rest of your argument, your assertion, is strong. We understand the behaviors of the people who are involved, because even though the rules are the same and the pieces are the same, the control strategies work. The behaviors very much color the outcomes. We need to work collaboratively and cooperatively to understand the game. And frankly, we need to make smart decisions on when to get out of the game. And there's a difference between a bad decision and a wrong decision. And when we make a good decision to get out of the game, we made a good decision that clears the way for other unmet medical needs to get to the patient. Because here's the thing. We are learners. We are scientists. We are engineers. We are in a learning organization. We produce grams of material, but everything we do produces a learning event. Vials, syringes, pills are like expense. You spend them once, you use them once, and they're gone. Oh, but that process learning, that's capital. And you derive value from it. It's the area under the curve. And we have a responsibility to make sure that we derive that value, because creativity, innovation, science, engineering is going into generating it, and we need to get that value from it for our organizations, for ourselves personally, but also for the patients that benefit from these drugs. So I hope that in going through some of this, there's been 1 or 2 thoughts that are applicable to the residual uncertainty that you have to manage. Or at minimum, you've learned a little bit more about a very exciting time in the development of pharmaceuticals in the United States. The biotech space is really taking off. It's a time of change, but it's an exciting change rather than a drying change. It's an exciting change, okay? Or I hope that you've got something in there where you think about how this applies to your shop. And if not, well, never mind. And I appreciate your courtesy.